Hello everybody and welcome back to One Autistic Person. This is the 13th video that I'm doing in a 50 video series that looks at the 50 questions of the Autism Quotient, which is a pre-screening questionnaire that is often used as part of the diagnosis process for autism. This is more of a statement than a question, and this one's going to be slightly different to the ones that we've done previously. So previously I've been looking at whether we can find a benefit rather than a deficit, because the diagnosis process in itself looks for deficit, which they are deficits, but I was hoping to try and find ways of us looking at how we can look at something in a positive light that's seen as a negative. With this one, because of the way that it's worded, there's not really a way of doing that, but I did want to look at assumptions in relation to autism and how these kind of assumptions can be damaging, and a complete misconception of the way that an autistic person may feel. So this one, as I say, is the 13th question or statement on the Autism Quotient, and it is, I would rather go to a library than a party. Now, I've said I definitely disagree with this. Now, I would assume that the assumption would be that you would rather go to a library than a party. And I mean, I'm assuming that. I don't know. I don't know where that sits. I do also think that within the Autism Quotient, they've now made them as sort of just like test questions rather than them being fully assessed within the actual questionnaire and not necessarily scored. But I wanted to kind of touch on the idea of this because at first glance, a lot of people will probably think, oh, library, quiet, people who are autistic might be more likely to want to go to a library than a party. And in reality, when I put definitely disagree, I do definitely disagree. I would definitely not rather go to a library, which I'll get into in a minute why that is the case. But it kind of gives you two sort of options without any context to them. So for me, a library has some very specific experiences that I personally don't like. So I'll touch on that first. So a library is quiet, which I think is the reason why there might be an automatic assumption of the fact somebody who's autistic might want to go there. But actually, I find the silence and the quiet really disconcerting because I hear every noise in an exaggerated way. So if somebody pulls a book out and drops it, or even just knocks it against something, if somebody talks or coughs, all of those things become sensory overload to me. The lightings are often quite extreme. The environment in itself feels really, really overwhelming to me in a library. I love books, so it's nothing to do with liking or disliking books or anything like that. But the fact that I can hear people walking, quite often it's wooden floorboards. Everything just feels a bit creaky and just disconcerting, and I feel very off kilter when I'm in a library. I mean, it's a very long time since I've actually been into a library. But the party side of this, to me, needs a lot more context, because would I go to a house party? No. Would I go to a rave? No. Would I go to a really over-the-top, hyperactive party that has loads of people talking, lots of people drinking, lots of people interacting? Absolutely not. But for me, the context comes in if I look at a party, there's various different options when it comes to that. So for me, if it was a dinner party with friends and family, I would struggle with it, but I'm much more likely to enjoy that experience than I would a library. I would actually not enjoy a library experience. There's also a lot of expectation that comes with a library to be quiet, and sometimes I am not, and I make noises because of the fact that I am stressed. So I quite often will cough, or I will I will do things with my fingers. I sometimes clap and things like that. So if I'm doing that in a library, it's going to be a much more difficult situation for me to deal with. And also, it doesn't take into context the fact that I'm probably going to be going to a library on my own, Whereas a party, I'd probably go with somebody else, and it'd probably be with people that I knew. I wouldn't go to a party that I didn't know people in. So if it was specifically, would you go to a library or a house party that had loud music, it would need to be more specific. And I think this is where sometimes the Autism Quotient falls down a little bit, because there's a lot of questions in it that don't give context. And it feels like you're pushed to give an answer for something that doesn't have the context for you to be able to make the decision. And I think that plays in a lot to the way a lot of autistic people think. We don't just think linearly and think of what a party is or a library is. We'd think about all of the experiences that are going on with that, and would need more context to a situation. So I think this comes down to misconceptions and traditional thought process, and or conventional thought process, or outdated thought process when it comes to autism, because I could deal with a party a lot easier than I could deal with a library, and I just feel this is the epitome for me of how people get autism wrong and do not understand what the lived experience of an autistic person is like. Because if this is that there is a thought process that libraries are somehow a better sensory experience than a party, then there is a really deep misunderstanding of it, even from a very basic level of understanding autism from my personal view. Because it's the fact that I think people think, oh, you just want to go and look around a library, and those experiences would be nice for you. I mean, I could do things to make sure that my sensory experience was better. I could wear noise cancelling headphones. I could have a stimming toy with me, so that I maybe don't do the clapping things and things like that. But I would still be very dysregulated after coming out of a library. I have never gone into a library and come out of it and felt better for going into it. When I was doing uni work, I actually tried going to a library a few times to see whether I could work better from there, and I actually got no work done, got overwhelmed, and had to leave. And I felt at the time, obviously didn't understand that I was autistic. I didn't understand why I was feeling the way that I was feeling about it. So I came out of it feeling like, why am I not able to study in the place where people go to study? So I think if there's an absolute reason to go to a library, then, and especially if it's a special interest related thing, so if there are books that you want to read, or if there's newspaper articles that you can only get that are from local newspapers that you wanted to go to, and there was a special interest side of it, I think I could overcome my sensory issues while that was happening, but I would still feel dysregulated after doing it. A party, I would also have a lot of prep to it, because I understand the fact in my head that I'm going to struggle with the social situations within a party, and I would also allow myself that decompression time afterwards. Whereas a library, I don't know that I would necessarily. I probably would now, but certainly prior to diagnosis, and even until I've really thought about this from this question, I wouldn't have necessarily thought about how I would have to do self-care in relation to going to a library. It's actually been really interesting to think about it, because I think if I ever went to a library again, I would really have to make sure that I did a lot of self-care pre and prep for self-care afterwards. So yeah, I think this comes down to a misconception. The fact the question is in there means that at some point this was thought of as part of it, even if it's not currently scored, and it's not been taken out because of the fact they don't want to take it out of it. I think it's very interesting to think about the fact that is something that has been thought about autism, and I think it could make people think when they're doing the AQ that maybe they go, well, maybe I should prefer to go to a library, but actually that experience is really, really jarring to me. It's not something that I enjoy doing, and maybe I should enjoy doing it. Yeah, so this one, like I say, is not the same as the other ones. It's more of this is a misconception. It's an assumption made about autistic people, and I think, and what I'm trying to do here, I suppose, is try to say, just because of the fact that you might answer party to this, a library can be just as much of a sensory problem, if not more, than a party can be. And I think it's really interesting that maybe some of the misconceptions people have around autism come from this kind of thought process. So yeah, that's just my little opinion on what I think of this statement that's made within the Autism Quotient. I'd love to hear what other people's views are, whether they would prefer a library or a party, and the reasons why. So brilliant. Thank you very much, and I would love it if you could comment. Like I've said in all of these videos, I really want to try and make this a community for people to have an open conversation about the way that they experience their lives and autism. And if you are somebody who has an autistic person in your life, what you are experiencing in relation to that. So yeah, so if you could comment, obviously subscribing and sharing and all of those other good algorithm things would be great. But I mostly hope that you're enjoying these videos, and thank you very much. I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you. Bye.